Welcome to Unbound. You're here for conscious chats that go deeper than your Instagram feed, where we ditch the dogma but keep it real. So let's get unbound. Hi, Hannah. Welcome back.
Hi, Georgia. Thank you. It's very exciting to be here. Slightly different setting than last time.
I know. I love to see that lovely green foliage behind you. Are we going to get any cat visitors?
Well, what we do have at this moment is a whippet that is lying in front of the fire in the sunshine.
Dying to see that whippet.
She's so beautiful. She's the softest thing you'll ever touch.
Oh,
a little bit anxious, I would say, but fortunately not at this moment.
Well, speaking of anxiety.
What a perfect segue.
I wanted to catch up today and talk about, your 20s, because we touched on it a little bit in our earlier episode on purpose, but it is such a time, and particularly now, I think more so than ever, with the advent of social media, with the onset of AI, there is a lot of pressure in your 20s. And I wanted to, just drop in and share a little bit of wisdom about navigating that time.
I can't wait. I am thinking back to my 20s, current age 42. But it was a time when I remember joining Facebook. That's when it was like, that was all beginning. And I'm so relieved now that that's like everything that we have actually didn't exist then. Because, there are moments that I think of where I'm like, I'm glad that wasn't, recorded, kept for an infinite amount of time digitally, and the pressure that would have added. Like, it seemed like that time in life, I had so many concerns about like my life and myself, to not have to compare what my life looked like and how I felt about myself with what other people were showing about their lives and what they were doing and how they looked and how they appeared to feel about themselves.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is social media, but with every challenge comes the gift. And if we look at what is the high value of that, I think what social media does is, if you can stay centered, and we'll talk a little bit about, what's going to support you in navigating this time most. But if you can stay centered, it's going to open your perspective, broaden your horizons from what we might have had. So pathways that we just weren't even aware were available to us, particularly, we were growing up in Aotearoa and little old New Zealand, that's often a little bit behind on where things are moving economically. And certainly, of course, I think, social media and the internet and all of the things have shortened or closed that gap, but you can get exposed to more ideas. It's really, there is this sort of balance between allowing inspiration to come and then not making it be a cause of self-doubt or insecurity, or I should be doing what others are doing, or they're there, and all of those things. So that is quite a hard place to get to, I grant you, but it does certainly provide more opportunities. And I think one of the great gifts of this time is that a lot of the barriers to, if we're talking about progressing in your career or starting your own business, there are so many more options than there were. We were in the time where it was still like, you go to uni and then you become a graphic designer, a lawyer, a doctor, it was very much traditional laid out pathways. And now what we're seeing is, when we were coming up in that time, to get a website, to have a brand, you had to spend thousands of dollars, like maybe $5,000 to $10,000 just to have a brand or a website. Now you can just do it yourself. When I started teaching meditation, it was 2016, I had taught already 50 people before I even had a website, because of social media, because of having Facebook and Instagram. And then I designed my own website. And I think 3, 4, 5 years, I had the website that I'd designed, which admittedly wasn't the greatest website of all time. But it removes barriers to entry. Now you've got AI, you've got things like Canva, where you can pop in there and design a whole brand. Even for someone like me who's not particularly visually skilled, I would say those creative areas were not my forte. And I've learned how to do them over the last few years. And so also this generation coming through, they're very familiar with with tech, with apps, they're going to be more familiar with AI than certainly we are, because they're more of a tech generation than we were. So I think that it's good to keep your attention on what the advantages are, because whilst the challenge is definitely there, so are the advantages. So there's so much more that you can be doing, but then we also come across the problem of so many choices, so many directions.
That's what I was going to bring up, actually, because I'm like, well, yeah, it's true. There are, the barriers to entry into so many things have been removed, and you've got so many options, and you've got the ability to do so many things yourself. But I recall in that time wondering, about my direction, sometimes feeling directionless, sometimes concerned about not knowing what I wanted or where I should be going, or, what way to point. And then feeling also like, but I should know. And so I think in that time, over later years, I've developed discernment. That's come with experience. It's come with age. It's come with meditation. It's come with all of those different elements. I had some discernment at that time. I remember things feeling more right, than other options, but there was so much questioning.
Yeah, and I think this is all just such a good point to touch on, because these are really, I'm sure, the feelings that anyone who's listening to this, and I hope that there are many of you listening in your 20s, or someone who's in that phase. Maybe it's your child or your grandchild, whatever it might be. Those feelings are so real at that time. They're kind of real. The reality is they're real in a lot of phases of life. I don't think, for a long period of time, people often don't feel like they really know. Maybe you and I, particularly where we are now, have a certain level of feeling very aligned, but it's taken time. And something that you mentioned, I didn't have the discernment then that I have now. And so there are a few things I wanted to touch on. Firstly is that you can't rush the timing. So there is this sense of, particularly, and I think this is the downside of having a lot of other people's experience online. I've made millions of dollars on an app, and I'm a billionaire at 23, and I've now, done this and that by 24, is that we can really get in very easily into that comparison game. So we have to drop into, in order to be balanced and stay regulated and actually enjoy this time, we really have to come back to self and come back to that deeper knowledge, which is that every single person is a unique soul on their own unique timeline and on their own unique path. And one is not better than the other. The person that maybe makes millions or billions of dollars in their early 20s might or probably will experience more financial flow in life. It doesn't mean they're having a better life. It doesn't mean that they're a better person, and it doesn't mean that they're particularly happy. So we have to keep coming back to, what are we really here for? We're here to grow. We're here to expand from where we currently are, and we're here to enjoy. And so we want to be enjoying all phases of the journey. And I don't think I was enjoying this phase so much. I was enjoying aspects of it, which was an extreme amount of hedonism and partying and things, but then also that was causing a lot of downside for me. So I think that it's good to just keep coming back to that. And I would recommend anyone who's in that phase to be anchoring themselves in deeper wisdom regularly to help offset the pull that social media has, the pull into, I must be doing this, I should be further ahead, I should already have 50K in investments, I should have bought a house. Times are changing. Where you may want to invest your money is changing. Property may not be the solution. So we also have to stay open, because where our previous generations, the pathway was you went to uni, you bought a house, you got married. Now, that's great, but a lot of people haven't been particularly happy doing that necessarily, following that particular model. So we want to stay open to what is true for us and what is the need of the time. Now, one of the other benefits of the time now is that you've got more information than ever about smart ways to invest money, how to, be be investing for yourself now, which was not available to us, particularly women back then. So you really only did that if you had a significant amount of money or you were trained in investment. Now you can learn to do it for yourself. It's a lot more access. So that means that might be a more financially viable path than particularly property straight away. So the fact that property seems unattainable, which I think is a great big stressor as well, is okay, well, let's not get attached to that then if it's not all about getting the house. And I think that also that's a mistake that's been made, which is I will just spend my whole life trying to get the house. And then once I've got the house, I'll struggle with the mortgage because we're mortgaged to the hilt now. Interest rates have changed and there's so much strain. So there may be different choices that you might even make I'm not going to put myself under that pressure. I'm not going to even try, if it's this difficult at the moment to buy a house, I'm not going to try and do that. I'm just going to be comfortable renting for a while and be investing in other directions and letting things build financially and letting things build in terms of mastery within your own self. We can't rush that timeline. There are studies that say it takes 10,000 hours to become really good at something. And there just is no shortcut to that. There is no way that AI is going to shortcut that. And in fact, in these times, I think it's even more important to put attention on upskilling and finding pathways in which you grow and expand and allowing that to take some time. The other piece that's happening now is this productivity culture where it's super instant gratification focused, where you need to get good at it now, you need to be a master now because the people that you inspire are. But if you look at their pathway, it's taken them time to get there. Sure, there are some very young gun entrepreneurs who just came out of the gate, but that's also unique to their pathway. It doesn't mean that just because you're not there's something wrong with you. So really coming back to trusting in the timing of your life and allowing things to unfold, which I don't think you're going to be able to do unless you're regulating in some way.
Okay, I've got at least 3 questions. So.
Good.
first one is kind of a bit of a curiosity, but I'll preface this by saying that some element of this gave me a great sense of freedom and liberation and fun and play. Here's the question. Is there a certain amount of hedonism, particularly at this time in your life, that is beneficial? I
think so. I think, follow your own feeling about what you feel to do. I think the hedonism that I enjoyed, it was really fun. And honestly, sometimes I look back and talk to friends of mine about these were, some of the greatest. We remember particular nights out. And I can't say that the fully relevant, aligned thing for me to be doing, because I did end up with depression, but I had a depression a lot through that time. I also ended up with cancer. So I don't think that my body loved all of it, but also I think that is potentially unique to me in many ways. I think there is a particular time in life before you have children, if that's what you choose to do and if it's aligned for you, before you're more settled and there's less freedom and choices available to you because you're becoming more settled in your lifestyle. You have more responsibilities, whether that is a mortgage or a more intense job where there's a lot more responsibility, or children, obviously, where you have to sort of stay in one place and you need to, really focus on those things. They take up a lot of your time and energy. So in your 20s, really the emphasis should be on fun and play and exploration. So this questioning that you mentioned, well, I'm questioning myself. I should know, what is my pathway? I should know it. I really recommend getting comfortable with questioning. There is nothing wrong with questioning things. I think there's so much stress applied to not knowing. And the truth is you can't know. Neither of us, when we look at our pathways, and so you were interested in writing and started down that pathway then, and now you're, primarily a podcaster, but also have the wonderful My Big Moments books series for children. And so you could never have seen where it was going. Podcasting didn't even exist. I was in insurance for 12 years. And I also don't think that that was the wrong pathway. It wasn't relevant or possible for me to be teaching in this way in my 20s because it takes a certain level of experience. I had to go through a pathway of releasing so much stress and so much trauma and move out of depression and anxiety and have that pathway then become what I teach from that lived experience. And so there is no way that it could have happened any earlier. I wouldn't have had any interest in it. And so that also really speaks to the soul's pathway, which is there are relevant stages on the journey, and some of them are, this really doesn't work for me. I really don't like this. And it's that crunch that actually creates the alchemy to push you in the direction where you're meant to go. And I think the time that I had in insurance has also made me a better teacher because I have lived corporate. I know the pressures. I know the stress of that life. I know the routine of that life. I can walk into a boardroom in any industry and speak intelligently about meditation rather than it being very disconnected from what that experience of life is. I learned to speak in front of 200 to 300 people at least. So there were so many skills that ended up applying themselves into this pathway, which you wouldn't naturally expect. I learned business skills, which I also use now. So sometimes and often, in fact, you can't see where the pathway is leading. So it all comes back to, which is really the deeper message for anyone, is to being in this moment now, seeing what's available to you, seeing what choices are there, where do you feel inspired, that natural inspiration to go. There's more freedom to explore in your 20s, to travel if that's what you feel called towards, which you may not, but if you do, to travel, to broaden horizons, to explore and expand. And it may be things that you see or are exposed to while you're traveling, which is not technically productive, quote unquote. You know, if you're traveling for a year or two, taking some time out after uni or just simply as a time to explore, you could view that as, oh, well, I'm not, investing right now and I'm not saving money, I'm spending it and I'm not earning and I'm not progressing my career. And I'm sure those are all the stressful thoughts that come up for anyone that's feeling inspired in that direction at a particular point in time. But it may be the thing that actually puts you on the pathway to where it's all heading for you in terms of a career or a way to express into the world. And not everyone will necessarily have, that more outward pathway as a purpose. It may be that your primary role for a period of time is caregiving, is looking after a sick or elderly parent or looking after your children for a while. And it's not going to be until after that if you feel inspired to do something more external, that comes along. It doesn't have to look that way. But for those that are particularly seeking that, I think it's good to remember that you can just relax and enjoy it a little bit. You don't have to be having a investment fund of X and, as a business created by 25. I think a lot of those timelines that we put on ourselves, I was listening to Untidy the other day.
Great show.
It was such a good podcast. And, I think, I can't remember what the context was, but Matilda was talking about, I wanted to have kids by 27 or something. Yeah. There was all these sort of milestones that we set ourselves, and they may look different for different people, because also not having children is a valid choice as well. But whatever the milestone might be, it's often way earlier than it's realistic as well. So it is good to bear in mind that often the timelines and expectations that we put on ourselves are way too high. So we just need to relax a little bit, let life play out a little bit more. And all you really need to do is be tuning to what feels true for you in this moment. When we do that over a lifetime, we end up naturally finding the path that we're meant to find at the time that we're meant to find it. And when our attention is going outward a lot onto what others are doing and what their expectations are, parents' expectations, what's happening on social media, we just need to remember to pull that energy back. Sometimes I talk about it like it's a bit like an octopus, and your energy is being drained from your centralizing point, which is your present moment awareness in this moment, in this body here. It's being drained out into, what are my parents thinking? What's happening on social media? And all these tentacles of energy going outward. And so you're draining the system. You're draining the very thing that's going to give you the knowledge the perception, the insight, the fine level of feeling, that feeling of charm bubbling up to direct you where you're meant to go in the moment. And you're becoming dysregulated because the more your energy goes out, the more anxiety is building. And so you can even have that awareness of pulling the tentacles back in and just recognizing, okay, yes, I've seen that on social media. And it actually, if I'm jealous of it or something, it means there's some inspiration there. There's actually something that I'm wanting about that. Is it that I want to, speak eloquently like that person does? Or is it that I want to be in that industry? Or is it that I want to have a level of success where I'm known for something? Okay, good. We can take that piece, pull the energy back. We don't need to be them. We can't be them. We shouldn't want to be them. Pull that energy back, and then, okay, what is my next available, relevant move in this moment? Now, if I feel called to move in that direction, what would be the next one step that I could take now? That is a really good practice of coming back to self here, trusting yourself to move forward, trusting that knowledge and information that you need is right here in this moment. It's not out there. It's not in the future. It's actually right now. And if you want to accelerate that path, it's going to happen far more smoothly if you do that process of coming back to now, rather than your mind is stuck in a future that isn't necessarily yours.
Yeah, I think it's such an important thing to say, is like paying attention to the things that feel true for you. Because I remember, there's a lot of things happening at that time. One of the things is people will like to give you a lot of advice about what they think is right for you. And that's often not what is right for you, but it's based on like their fears of, what you may or may not achieve in your life, but, compared to what they maybe wanted to have done and how they'd like that to be different for you and what they'd like to see. And like, I remember, one of the things, like I did a lot of travel while other people were finishing their degrees. I started my degree. It wasn't for me. And so whenever I was unsure about the direction to move in, I got on a plane. I went just in a completely different direction. But one of the realizations I had when I traveled, and I think like I would never wish to have a different experience from that, because that's really stayed with me. But one of the realizations I had was how important like writing was for me, and the joy that I could bring to other people through something that I made and brought into the world. And if that was like the only important realization for my career path, that was worth it. But I then also had all these other life experiences. And like, I think, there was a slight distraction in being concerned about kind of the conventional conveyor belt of life passing me by while other people were working towards their degrees or working towards their first homes or being in, major relationships, and I was living out of a backpack in Peru or whatever, that there was some stress about not being on that conveyor belt, like what you talked about that you heard in Untidy, that we saw this picture of our lives and we thought that we'd do this and then we'd do that and then we'd do that and then we'd do that and then we'd eventually retire and get interested in gardening. And it's just not the way that it works out. But I look back and I see every single experience added up to what I'm doing now in some little way, even if it was to go, that's not for me.
Exactly.
Or that is for me.
Yeah. And the power of that, we just want everything to be the smooth path of like stepping stone to stepping stone to stepping stone. And then we get successful and then everyone knows who we are. And, we have to recognize that actually that isn't going to bring happiness and fulfillment. So we want to recognize where fulfillment really is found, which is on the inside and also in the process. If we become hyper outcome attached, then we're going to be disappointed if the outcome doesn't deliver what we thought it was going to deliver, which quite often is the case. People get to this pinnacle in their career, they become famous, and then they're like, oh, actually the fame is horrible, is what a lot of celebrities say. They just want the freedom of anonymity. They enjoy the perks of having a wonderful career and certainly the financial support, but many of them say that the fame part is not at all what it's cracked up to be. And I'm not saying that everyone wants to be famous and certainly shouldn't want to be famous, but if that is one of the pieces of you're looking at people who are known for something, we have to recognize that sometimes we're desiring the wrong thing as well. So remembering that what we really want to do is to feel happy and fulfilled and inspired. And so pulling it right back to allowing ourselves to feel that now rather than it being a future event. So when you're traveling and doing something that's slightly, out of the conventional pathway at the time, you were feeling happy and fulfilled and inspired and having life experiences. And I think there is also the element of not valuing life experience. So life experience isn't something that you can chalk up on your, list of productive items, or I achieved this and I achieved that, tick, tick, tick. No one really puts life experience, tick. And yet that is what develops curiosity, creativity, the ability to relate to a lot of people, which is something that you use now interviewing people, for example. The greater awareness that you have about what's going on in the world. And again, for you, a very important piece was to recognize, I can write. I enjoy writing. And I'm sure, maybe you were sharing some creative writing about those travels, for example, at the time.
Group emails. Remember on the straight out of the Hotmail account into the group email.
Yeah, for those listening that are in your 20s, you won't be able to relate to that at all. Group emails was like the original Snapchat, except it didn't disappear and people could reply all and it went round and round. So that's how we communicated with friends and family.
From internet cafes.
No reels, no stories. Just go and log into an email. Anyway, enough about us. We're old.
I know. Let's not get stuck in nostalgia. It does bring me to my next question very nicely, though, which is, as we're talking about, fulfillment is on the inside, but so much of society says that the markers of success in life are things that you see from the outside. So that might be, how you're educated, your wealth status, the car that you drive, the family that you have, how you look, how much money is in the bank, what other people think of you. And so, in terms of what are genuine markers of success in life that we can refocus on outside of what other people might think are markers of success?
If you're looking to go deeper in life and find a tool for greater regulation, I'd highly recommend learning Vedic meditation, which is the foundational practice I've relied on since 2016 and teach full time. It's an effortless practice which uses a particular type of mantra to take the mind beyond thought, rests the body deeper than sleep, and rapidly releases stress. I teach in Aotearoa in Byron Bay in Australia, but can also put you in touch with a local teacher. Reach out via Instagram at GV Meditation or via gvmeditation.com. You'll love it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think we need to come back to asking and ask yourself this question so that you can develop your own set of personal values, whether they align with what I'm saying or not. But I think if we look at all of the things that we think that we want at whatever stage of life we're at, 20, 40, 60, wherever, it's really about happiness. It's about feeling happy, feeling inspired, and feeling purposeful in life and loved. Those things that we're all really looking for. Now, then we can dial it back and think, okay, the things that I think that I want at this point in time, why do I want status? Why do I want to be known? Why do I want to have financial flow or, financial success? It comes back to sometimes there might be subtle feelings of needing to be validated, wanting to be known. It might be, I want to be seen or I want to be validated. So if we can become curious about what our drivers are and start to recognize, and again, this is something that we didn't have so much knowledge or access to when we were coming through our 20s, but now you're all so much more aware and conscious than we were. So you're hearing this instead. You can start to make discernments about, is that what I'm really looking for? Or do I just really need to heal that part of me that wants to be seen, that wants to be heard? Can I hear myself now? Can I see myself now? Can I appreciate myself now rather than waiting until you get to that point, which may never arrive, because that isn't going to be the pathway for everyone. Not everyone is going to have huge amounts of financial success and be known, etc., etc. We look at the billions of people in the world. It's not the relevant path for everyone. So if you're attached to a pathway that isn't yours, it's only going to cause suffering. So that is why I keep coming back to this knowledge, because if we think about what I really want to feel is probably, I guess most people would agree, happy, inspired, purposeful, loved, then creating suffering by attaching to something, a pathway that's not yours or that's quite far away, is only going to lead to suffering between now and then, and this constant wheel of comparison and insecurity, because you're trying to be someone that you're not, or someone that you're not yet. So I think that, yes, of course, financial stability and security is something that is beneficial to all and is available to all. But if you're being creative and inspired and are moving down that pathway, you're going to find ways to express into the world that is going to draw resources towards you. And the biggest thing that I think one can cultivate at any point in time to minimize suffering and maximize happiness, which is what we're really after, is a deep sense of self-trust, trusting yourself that you can navigate anything, that you can show up in the moment, that you can be creative if the financial flow is a little bit more contracted at a period of time. I mean, both of us have been through times like that. Mm-hmm. COVID, for example, where you just have to adapt. And at that time, I remember thinking, well, as long as I can meet my bills, I'm not saving, I'm not kicking any goals at the moment. I'm just aiming to make sure that my bills are met. And I took financial assistance that was available through the government. I took a small business loan, which was one of the things offered by the New Zealand government at the time to support the cash flow, and then just work to pay it back. These times of contraction also are temporary. They expand, they contract again, they expand, they contract again. The more we can come to that knowledge, the less we're going to get into that suffering mindset at that point in time. So starting to discern what is really driving you. I think some of the greatest things that you can cultivate in your 20s are, one, self-trust. Recognizing, and again, sometimes that's going to come through the life experiences that you choose to have, through the relationship that didn't work out. Trusting yourself to see, this didn't work out for me, and I had the wherewithal and the courage to step out of it and to say no and to leave someone that maybe you really, really cared for. And that teaches you that you have that inner capacity. And so that learning is so valuable. It's not all about meeting the quote unquote right partner and then staying with them for the rest of your life. That will also not be, as we've seen, the pathway for many people. The percentage of people that that's true for is probably actually quite low. One early partner in your 20s that you marry and stay happily married to, because let's aim for the right thing, not just staying together, and that's the marker of success. How happy are you in that marriage? Do you feel you're growing together? Do you feel connected? Let's put our attention on the things that we truly want rather than what society has set up as this sort of, symbol of success. So we can develop this self-trust sometimes through having experiences which don't work out, through leaving toxic environments, whether it be a workplace or a relationship. And so things are working out for you. Trust the timing of your life. Those stepping stones are building the resilience, the capability, the adaptability, the self-trust that you're going to need for whatever the next phase is and for where it's all heading. So I think that's one thing that's very important to cultivate. Another thing would be self-awareness. The value of that cannot be underestimated, because the sooner you become clear and aware of what you really are desiring, where it's coming from, what are the relevant desires or drivers, what are the ones that are driven by trauma, what is true for you, what your skills and abilities are, what you actually enjoy doing in life and what you don't, the faster you're going to find that more aligned path. So self-awareness is a huge piece. And luckily for all of you, there are infinite amounts of resources available to you now at the flick of your thumb on the iPhone to find, which we also didn't have. And so in that way, I think the pathway can be shortened, because the more you're out of alignment, the more you're unaware. And I think for me, that was true for my whole 20s. I really only started to become more aware of myself post 30. And that brings me to a very important point in the middle of all of this. And I'm sure we'll cycle back to some other pieces that I can see you building up there that you want to ask about. But since we're talking about this timing, there is an astrological transit that happens to all people, regardless of whether you care about astrology or not, you think it's woo-woo crap. Saturn will return to the place where it was at the time of your birth at ages 28 to 30, roughly, depending on, again, the degrees of Saturn. But we can just say roughly 28 to 30. So this is a time where you will naturally, Saturn will have you. It's a planet that is a serious planet. It's about, let's get mature, let's get serious. Okay, you had a lot of fun. Now, this is nature's divine timing. Saturn does not come at 25, 22, 18. It's not meant to come any earlier. You may have other Saturn transits and that will be relevant for you. But this major transit of Saturn return, it comes around for everyone at 28 to 30, not any sooner and not any later. So this is this inspired timing, which is have some fun, explore, play, and then Saturn will come and let's get a little bit more serious, because, life is not forever in this body. And so anything that is out of alignment may strip away for you at that time. If we think about that, that's actually a great gift. So this is why whatever questioning you have might uptick a little bit in this period. You will probably be questioning a lot of things. You may be having questions like, what's it all for? Who even am I? Why am I doing this? Why am I in this relationship? Why am I in this job? Now, if the things you're in are aligned, you won't have those thoughts. You will probably want to commit deeper to them. It might be a time where you take the next level in the relationship. You move in, you get more serious, you get engaged if that's a pathway you want to go down. You have children, you make greater investments in your career pathway, or receive a promotion or move forward a little bit. So if you're already aligned, it will deepen. And it's a really powerful time to make deeper commitments, because Saturn is associated with long-term commitments. That which gets started in Saturn stands the test of time. But equally, if anything is out of alignment, it's likely to be stripped away. So if you find yourself suddenly wanting to change career, suddenly wanting to change direction, suddenly feeling like the relationship is no longer aligned, it's this great gift of creative intelligence to say, I'm going to support you in getting aligned here, so you don't miss the boat on that and you don't drag out things that aren't aligned. So I think for me, that period hit, and I started to, just after that period, I started to just really realign a lot of things. And that was definitely a poignant time where I was starting to question, starting to make shifts around my direction. And I needed a couple more, as I call them, shunts in the right direction before I got there. But it really did start to plant the seed. So there's this deeper spiritual maturity that comes online then. So if you're in that period, just know that your questioning is actually aligned. It's aligned to question. And I come back to what I said earlier, which is questioning is not a bad thing. It allows us to get really sure of, am I just following the sheep? Am I in a herd mentality right now, and am I doing things for the right reason? If we don't take time to reflect and consider, how will we know we're aligned? So it's a good time to reflect, to make changes that might have been not available to you before or had not even occurred to you before. The energy is there to support you to shift, to let go, to make changes, or to deepen the things that are already in alignment. So that is an important thing. If we're talking about the 20s, that's a really important transit to talk about.
I think it's like the words gear shift come
Yes.
up for me. It is a massive gear shift. Might feel a wee bit clunky, might grind that gear. It's definitely manual. For those of you who don't know what manual cars are. And I think back to that time about how kind of it felt timely, but it also felt sudden. Like it was a very noticeable move. And it is about that, like, okay, the choice to remain immature about some things is now removed from you.
Yeah.
And you are in this different gear, and you will go and do that now. I think that's how it can feel. But the other thing that came up was sometimes you hear, as parents, which if you're, maybe in your early 20s, that might not apply to you at the moment, but as parents, sometimes you hear, if you're concerned about your parenting or wanting to be a good parent or, seeking out information to make you a better parent, that in itself is a sign that you are a good parent, that you're doing a good job already. And because you're interested and you're curious and you're seeking information. And I would say for people who, are in their 20s and they're listening to this, that kind of applies to you, like that you're on the right track and you're doing well, and to just remember that you can have faith in yourself and you can have that self-trust because you're already listening to something that's very aligned, that's only going to bring you into greater alignment. And I think it's very easy to be so hard on yourself about the direction you're going and the speed in which you're going, or like the fact that you don't know, that, to have those little indicators that maybe everything is okay and you're following the breadcrumbs as you should be, and just to keep continuing following the breadcrumbs is a good reminder just not to be too hard on yourself.
Yeah, and to just enjoy. Don't try and leap ahead 5 steps, because if you're constantly doing that, again, your energy is constantly pulling away from now, and you're going to miss out on what's happening here for you now, which there's a lot of richness to mine in that time. So I would love to see all of you listening, you have this knowledge. Knowledge is power. It eliminates suffering. It eliminates fear if you allow it. If you're heading into your Saturn return, or you're in your Saturn return, embrace this time. Because if you're mature, if you're spiritually mature, which you must be if you're receiving this information, it can be such a profound time to really get clear, to really become aligned, to go deeper with wherever you're at, within yourself, within your career, within life. And so, allow it to be that for you. Recognize if we know, this is the flavor of the time, which is that I'm going to, feel a little bit more self-doubt, a little bit more questioning, and that's okay. It's actually on my timeline. It actually is aligned. Then we can just relax into it and think, okay, good. I'm questioning some stuff. What I'm going to do is I'm going to journal. I'm going to get a way to connect with myself, and I'm going to regulate so that I can really access the higher knowledge that's downloading through me at this time. So that is the other thing I talked about, cultivating self-trust, self-awareness. And the other piece, like if I look back and think, what would I tell my 20-year-old self now? It would be, for God's sake, get regulated. It wasn't going to be available to me then. I wouldn't have been interested. And so that's fine. But all of you are listening to this for a reason. You've been sent this podcast for a reason. It doesn't happen randomly. That if I had access to a tool like Vedic meditation, which is, the primary tool that I recommend because it just is so easy and so instantly effective, then I probably would have avoided quite a lot of suffering. It's just going to really take the edge off the anxiety, take the edge off the self-doubt, take the edge off the level of questioning that can cause these, cycles of thoughts going round and round and round, and give you a circuit breaker where you can actually connect. You can actually find a pathway to receive that inner clarity, which is going to make the whole period of time a lot smoother and a lot clearer for you. And I think clarity is something that people are often looking for and finding a little bit elusive. Like, how do I get clear? Now, there are times where you're just not meant to be clear. At the start of Saturn return, you're not going to have the clarity that you'll have at the end of Saturn return. It's a 2.5 year period for a reason. It's not you get everything at the beginning and then it's all smooth sailing, which is, I know what you want, but there's a process you've got to go through. The process of questioning, the process of coming to the realization, the process of making the change and letting go and realigning, and what is experienced in that time, that life experience, that growing resilience, that growing self-trust and self-awareness is so important. So it would be my absolute best recommendation to find a tool to connect, to regulate with yourself, because that will really support you through this time. And from there, you're going to have much more access to what is true for you now, what is the first breadcrumb, and bring down the noise of all of these thoughts about what should be happening, rather than being really clear and present with what is happening, what's available to me now, what is the higher purpose of this experience, what am I learning from this, and to really value that life experience, that growth that's happening through some of the crunchy times that I'm sure that you have had or are having.
I think something that I'm thinking about now as well is that, like, I'm glad I didn't know. I'm glad I didn't know where it was all going and what was going to happen and how things were going to unfold, because, like, it's fun to be surprised by your own storyline, you know? And although it's sometimes you're desperate to know that things are going to be okay, or that they're going to work out, or when you'll get to a certain place, or when you'll feel sure about something, I think it's good to be blind to the breadcrumbs that are coming. You know?
And nature makes it so. Universe makes it so that you can't know. And why is that? Because it is fun to experience the revealing of your own storyline. I think, you know, you've been meditating for a number of years, as have I. Partly how we find it fun is because of that process of the more that you align on the inside, the more you align with the part of yourself that's enjoying witnessing the unfolding of the storyline. And so it becomes more fun. Whereas I remember distinctly, even just prior to meditating, days before, desperately needing to know if it was all going to be okay and if I was going to be okay. And that's something that certainly comes over time with having experiences, and probably the most challenging experiences of life. And we've both had a few. But for me, divorce, cancer, these are the hardest things that I've experienced, relationship breakups, those things. And yet they've also given me the most expansion, the most joy, the most sense of my own capacity to meet any challenge, particularly going through cancer. I think it's just been such a gift because I know I can face anything. That was probably one of my worst fears, that I'll get cancer and be really sick and potentially, die. And I'm just not afraid of any of those things anymore. It's not something I want to experience again. It's not something that's particularly pleasant, but it was so expansive for me. So some of the things that you think you don't want are actually delivering deeper gifts that you don't even know to ask for and wouldn't ask for, because ultimately we do want to keep things comfortable and safe and easy. But life in its great intelligence does not align things that way, because that is not really where we grow and expand and find the most joy. When we stay safe, when we stay bound, that is not the most liberated, joyful path. So getting more comfortable with moving with the breadcrumbs and getting excited about, okay, I'm here, what's the next breadcrumb? Oh, okay, we're at a plot twist moment now. I've had some big plot twists. This great storyline. It's a great storyline. So this total redirection, you thought you were going to marry someone and then they cheat on you. You thought you were going to have children with this person and then the relationship doesn't work out. And part of the coming out of that is letting go of attachment to this pathway that you had expected. You had this expectation that it was going to go down. If you can come back to yourself in those moments and recognize, okay, that was never my timeline actually, and I mistakenly got attached to it because I didn't have the same level of knowledge that I have now. But now I know that this person, that pathway, that timeline wasn't going to actually bring the most happiness, fulfillment, joy, expansion. So I'm excited to see what comes. And I have some grief. I don't deny that, the grief that needs to be shared. But I also trust myself to be with myself through that time and to allow the emotion to move through, and I'm actually okay. And I'm actually going to come out of this. I can actually come out of anything from someone who maybe is a little bit further down the path, I can tell you in great confidence, you will come through absolutely everything, and you will come out the other side as a better person. Everyone will tell you that. You need to walk your own path, because you can't pick up that experience, that embodied wisdom, without going through it. But you can minimize some of the suffering and the expectation and the questioning and why me? What am I doing wrong? Am I just a fuck up? That piece that probably will naturally come up by coming back to this deeper knowledge, which is you are where you're meant to be for all reasons. And if you can just open up to 5-10% of your awareness, what could be a higher gift that I'm learning here? What is in this for me? It pulls your attention away from how wrong it all is and where you should be and now you're not there, and how it's disrupted this plan and this timeline that you thought that you were on, and onto coming into deep presence and connection with your actual timeline, which involves this hurdle, which involves this plot twist, and to really mine the nuggets and download as much of that as possible, because that is going to enrich your experience and actually accelerate you to where you really want to be, not just where you think you want to be.
And I think, when I look back at some of the biggest challenges in my life, the biggest challenges have been the bullet trains to personal growth, because there's no other choice. That there is actually no other choice. And that's, so sometimes when the stakes are highest, that's when you'll reach the furthest. And those things, they are just they are gifts, but they come in weird packaging a lot of the time. And we talked about that in that conversation you're referring to as well, that the greatest gifts in life just can come in the weirdest packaging. And when you find yourself, in those really gritty, grindy moments, that actually that's a good moment to acknowledge, because you've started. You're not before a shitty thing that might happen, or a big challenge or a big obstacle. You're in the process, which means that you're moving through it. And I think to remember that there's momentum there, and that you are moving through it, and it's not something, because everything changes all the time, that's not something that you're going to stay in forever. And at some point you look back and you can reflect, and then in that reflection you're like, one, it's a memory, it's past, it's great, but then two, I gained all this from it, and I never would have expected that.
Yeah, and I think that with the expansion over time, you start to see that, because you have enough of these experiences where it just feels like everything is breaking down, and this is the most magnified, intense moment of your life. If I think back to cancer and divorce, and I was just so all over the show at the time, and just questioning everything, and even just depressed and anxious and overwhelmed, and all of the things I can't even really describe some of those moments. With time, you recognize that how long did that really last? This is a couple of years, maximum. It's actually not that long in the scheme of things. But you have to stretch out your life, which is why the older you get, the more wisdom you gain. I think in my 20s, I thought I knew everything. I thought that I was, at the finish line of how I was going to feel inside. And thank God I wasn't. But we can also start to stretch our awareness. The thing that can help us align with that perspective that we're going to get after a long period of time is to start to stretch and expand our awareness now through techniques like meditation, because the more you can expand out, the more you can step back and have some space between you and the experience, some space to have that broader perspective that allows even just part of you, if it's a small part online at the time, where a large part of you will be dealing with the extreme amount of stress and emotions, and you're meant to have that. You're not meant to skip through it. You're not meant to fast forward to where you don't feel the emotions, which I'm sure is something that everyone wishes in those deep moments, the grief, the pain, the shock, whatever it might be. You just want to skip forward to the bit where you're over that. But trust that you will also come to that point, and it's only a matter of time. And what can you do to support yourself in the moment now? And I think that one thing that is so available now is so many resources. I would really take advantage of that. I would seek mentorship, because it really does help you to accelerate along the timeline. I know when I've sought out mentorship myself, I've just moved in leaps and bounds. When I've had really strong, clear wisdom that I've been accessing regularly, it just really aligns your thinking, and you spend less time in the worrying and the fear and the speculating and the cycles of overthinking, and more in the clarity, moving forward, taking the aligned, inspired actions. And so what it can support you to do is to minimize suffering. So I also would recommend taking advantage of all the resources that are available at the press of a button to you now, which is the upside of having the world where it is right now. And don't rely too much on AI. Use AI where it's relevant, but also have living wisdom where you're speaking to someone who is an embodied person that can give you really relevant and expanded wisdom that you can use now that you maybe haven't gained yet, but can accelerate you in moving you towards that direction.
Yeah. Okay. What about? I remember times when I felt quite directionless. Didn't feel that I could make a decision. Didn't know what I wanted or where I wanted to be or what I was particularly good at. Like, what about for those people who are just like, I feel like I can't even move in any direction because I don't know what feels right and what feels wrong and where to go. Like, how can you create clarity in that space and find movement in that space?
Firstly, recognize this is where you're meant to be right now. You're not meant to know. And to find a certain level of peace in letting go of that idea that you're supposed to have all the answers, because that can put an unnecessary pressure on you. There is a value to being in the discovery space. And the discovery space, by its very own nature, is one where you don't have a lot of the answers. So instead of trying to know it all now and thinking that you should, firstly, letting go of that. It must not be relevant, because if you were meant to know, you would already know. Deepening in this moment, so through the methods that I've recommended, getting a practice. If you're in a space of a lot of change, a lot of transition, a lot of questioning, having a meditation practice where you can regulate, where you can tap into deeper clarity is going to be supportive, because there might be something that's subtle, that's hidden under the surface that you haven't quite tapped into. So I would recommend giving yourself access to that. Why not make use of these tools that are available now? And I'm seeing people come a lot younger to learn to meditate, in their teens, in their early 20s, because they're aware of mental health issues. They're aware that anxiety is there. They're aware that there are tools available. And so make use of that. And then support yourself with a mentor. It's worth investing if you're feeling like completely lost and you are questioning everything and there doesn't seem to be any clarity. Perhaps a mentor can help you recognize the clarity that is already there, or help you move through the barriers that may be in the way of you moving in a direction that actually is laid out for you, but you've got this whole barrier of imposter syndrome, these ideas that you can't do it, the self-doubt, the self-criticism that are actually holding you back. And so you may have some directions that you're inspired towards, but the actual barrier is your own thinking, your own perception, your own fears, and sense of incapability that you might have around it. So how can you move through that? Get support that is also available to you. And sometimes I think, we don't want to spend money on that kind of thing, but you're going to really spend a lot more time in fear and indecision and stretch that out, and that it really extends your suffering, versus maybe it just takes one session with a really supportive mentor where you can, and sometimes there are free resources around that. So see what you can find, or speak to someone who's in your industry who may be willing to have a coffee with you once a month, or once every 2 months, even once every 6 months, to just support you. There's a lot of people that are willing to support someone who's coming up through their field. And that could be a way where you get a little bit more insight, a little bit more direction, or to work with someone more regularly if there's a lot of fear and thinking and belief systems that are holding you back, to kind of break through those at an earlier stage. And if you have an inspiration towards that, that is that fine level of feeling that's rising up within you that's saying, this is aligned for you. It's aligned for you to receive this wisdom now, and I'm going to put this person into your awareness, into your pathway, for you to spend some time with them, for them to offer that to you and for you to receive it. And that will accelerate things. And that may be someone that you stay connected with for a long time, or it may be one time or a few sessions and then you're off on your way, but they may be there to support you on the pathway. So look out for those little bursts of inspiration, that feeling of charm to reach out to that mentor or to book a session with that person, because there's something there for you to gain from that.
At the beginning of this conversation, we referenced anxiety, and I want to come back to that, because how about if people are listening and they feel debilitated by their levels of anxiety, maybe depression, maybe illness, and that they're in a place where they feel really debilitated, and that's what's causing them inertia?
Yeah, such a good question. Then the need of the time is to address that first. So don't try and, start a business from there, because that will only bring more anxiety. There'll be so many decisions to make. There will be so much responsibility that's required. So I would really recommend getting a therapist or a mentor, seeking out tools that support you, whether it be meditation, breath work, all of the above, to really address the anxiety and the depression and that state of the physiology. Likewise, if you're sick, the first port of call, the primary dharma, your primary purpose in this moment is to regulate yourself, because you can't do anything if you're not in a state that's capable, that has energy, dynamism, staying power. You're going to need staying power in order to achieve anything in life. In order to gain mastery, we need to stay with something, and staying power requires energy. It requires that life force. And if our life force is very low, then we need to start to tend to that first. So that would be my primary call. And you'll probably already know that because you feel like you can't do anything. And so the first port of call is absolutely to just tend to the body, tend to the physiology, tend to the emotional state, and spend some time with that. And it's okay. That is also where you're meant to be right now. Perhaps some karma is clearing something that you learn in that process, that you experience, a modality, a technique, a tool, a piece of wisdom, someone that you connect with might be the thing that you end up doing in life, or that brings on that sense of inspired purpose. Most people that you find that offer some kind of service have had an issue with that themselves. So the reason why I'm sitting here in front of all of you today, teaching spiritual wisdom, teaching techniques that regulate, is because I had severe depression and anxiety, so bad that it forced me on the pathway of liberation, of becoming unbound. So without that, I couldn't have had that embodied wisdom, experience the contrast, and then feel the passion and inspiration to share it. If I was already feeling fine the whole time, well, there's no passion or inspiration there. So, when we think about other people that we know, for example, Steph of, what are her gut tonics called? I can't remember.
Clover ferments.
Clover ferments. We love clover ferments as well. I need to get back to New Zealand so I can have some more of those. Her daughter had debilitating gut issues. She ended up having to probably spend a lot of time focusing on healing her daughter's gut issues, and that would have probably taken a lot of money, time, energy. Maybe she couldn't even work. Next thing you know, she discovers this particular recipe for a fermented tonic that has amazing results, and then that becomes her business. So the challenge can be the thing that is breeding the inspiration and giving you that direction towards your purpose. So don't be afraid of that. Recognize wherever you are right now is where you're meant to be. But what can support you now? What tools are available? What do you feel inspired to lean into to support you? Because that is also meant to be part of the process. We're not meant to just suffer and toil away and get into a cycle of despair around it and not reach out and not make use of the available tools. And sometimes it takes a while, and there's a process of trying a lot of things and those things don't work. And that's also supportive because it creates so much contrast when you find the thing that does work. It builds up this huge amount of passion and inspiration that pushes you and propels you on the path to want to share it, because you're like, I went through years and years and years and I don't want anyone to have this kind of suffering. This is why I'm here talking about your 20s, because I don't want people to suffer to the same degree that I did. They can speed things up a lot with the right knowledge, with the right techniques and tools that I didn't have at the time. So had I, at 7 become enlightened and wandered off and lived a very happy life. I don't think the genesis would be there necessarily to consistently show up to share and serve and still be offering all of these techniques this many years later.
Yeah, I love what you said there, Georgia, because also all of the experiences that you've had, all of your gifts and weird packaging, have meant that like you can relate to so many people on their different individual paths, and that's so relevant to what you do.
I'd love to actually share this moment that I had when I got to teacher training, and bearing in mind, I think I'm like 33 at the time, 33. So if you're 23, that's 10 years away from where you are now. At that point where I got to this teacher training and I nearly got to the end of it, and I had this just download, this deep knowing of seeing my whole pathway of all the challenges, which some of them still I haven't talked about, from an eating disorder to glandular fever to lots of depression, anxiety, crying all day from the age of 3, then cancer, divorce, all of these things. And I saw this whole just divine golden light through that whole pathway, and this realization that was all so that I could be here now and that I could relate to people in all these different positions. There wasn't just one set of challenges that I had, one flavor. Almost anyone that comes to me, I've had some experience, something similar, which does allow me to deeply relate and deeply know what the inner experience is and support them out of it. And it was so graceful. It was just very, very special.
That's really, really beautiful. Really beautiful. There's one word that I would like you to speak on briefly.
Yes.
I know you need to finish, but, and that word is surrender.
Surrender is something that I think it sounds like, defeat. You know, if I surrender, I'm just giving up. But there is this beautiful saying in the Vedic tradition, which is that I surrender at the feet, which is this bowing to the higher part of myself. And what it really brings to us is so undervalued. And I really learnt this through cancer, because I couldn't fight my way out of it. I couldn't plan my way out of it. I couldn't strategize my way out of it. I just had to go through it. And there was a certain point in time where I realized, okay, I've always thought, if everything happens for a reason, now I'm going to have to apply it to this. If this is happening for a reason, then I need to stop all the questioning, the decrying, the poor me, and why am I here? And my friends are having children, I'm doing cancer and chemo, and I'm alone, and all of the things, and just open to the experience. And every time that we surrender, we let go. We have to surrender our attachment to our suffering. Part of us wants to hold on to that. Well, I should be worried. I should be anxious. It supports me if I'm anxious, because then I can continue to think, and maybe then I'll get safe. It won't. It just creates suffering. The more we attach to anything and push against the flow of where things are at, the more we experience suffering. So actually, this surrender, which is something that has to be learned, and partly through the practice of meditation, because Vedic meditation is a letting go technique. It allows you to let go of a lot of the individual attachments, sort of expands you as you're practicing it. You learn to surrender. You learn to surrender even holding on to the mantra and the way that it's used. And this is teaching us the inner mechanism of letting go. The more we're attached, the more we're bound. Things can only go in one direction, can only look one way, or else I can't be happy. So when we fully let go, we can really open and free ourselves of all that stress of the holding on and the tension. It doesn't mean that we won't strive, we won't move, we won't put all manner of effort and energy into that which we're inspired by and that we want to move towards. But when we're attached, it can create so much suffering and stress. So sometimes life arranges a moment where we just have to surrender. And maybe that moment for you is right now, and you can do it without going through as much challenge as I did. You can learn the lesson early. We just choose to step out of the attachment, the suffering, the holding on to needing to be somewhere other than now, because that is one of life's greatest lessons. And when we realize that, when we truly start to live it, life becomes so much more free and playful. You can access the play, you can access the curiosity, because you're not so bound to, I need to know and I need to have hit this milestone and that milestone. And those may not even be relevant milestones for you. You're holding on and attached to something that simply is not lining up for you. It's like trying to hold on for the sky to be, lime green. you're going to spend your whole lifetime holding on and be utterly disappointed, where you could just start appreciating the fact that, it's yellow and sometimes pink,
Beautiful. Thank you, Georgia. I feel unbound about my early 20s now.
Such a good chat. I love this. And I would have loved to have had some of this in my 20s.
I know.
Wasn't our time, but it is your time. So you can claim this for yourself now. Yeah.
Thanks
for being here.
That was really fun.
Yeah. See you soon, everyone. Thanks for getting unbound with us today. We'd so appreciate it if you could take a moment to leave us a review and to share this episode with anyone who you think could benefit. It helps us to keep these conscious conversations flowing. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. See you next week.